Good morning, Metalheads here, and welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown. And today we're looking at the latest studio album from Sepultura, entitled Quadra. Sepultura might not have the instant fame and recognition of bands such as Metallica, Iron Maiden, and Slayer, but make no mistake, they are still one of the most iconic and important metal bands of all time. They released some of the best thrash metal of all time via albums such as Arise and Beneath the Remains. They pioneered black and death metal long before Belphegor and Behemoth were a thought in anyone's mind via their debut album Morbid Visions, and they played a seminal role in the development of nu metal via their album Roots, which in turn also introduced the world of heavy metal to indigenous music and to Brazilian culture. And in turn of all that, Sepultura kind of became the face of Brazilian rock and heavy metal and paved the way for the rich tapestry of rock and metal to emerge not just out of Brazil for that matter, but throughout all of South and Latin America. They are almost literally the Beatles of their region, and while some people have attempted to dismiss the band in a post-Max Cavalera world, it's worth noting that Sepultura have remained incredibly consistent, incredibly ambitious, and incredibly experimental, particularly within this last decade, as they've released arguably a series of strong albums that stand on par with any of the records we've just talked about. Eventually culminating in 2017's Machine Messiah, which some people went as far as to say was their best album, period, like maybe ever. And that all brings us now to Quadra, the band's 15th studio album, and one can't help but immediately wonder if Sepultura can continue to be as adventurous and ambitious now as they were in 1986, frankly. I mean, it's a long time for any band to stick around. But I guess as far as Sepultura is concerned, age really is just a number, because they haven't just released another great album, they've released one of the most intelligent, multi-layered, and dynamic albums of their career. Everything that we've appreciated musically about this modern incarnation of Sepultura very much remains intact on Quadra. You've got Derek Green's massive, thunderous howls. You've got Andreas Kisser's sinister riffs. You've got Paulo Jr.'s earthy, bassy backbone. And of course, you've got the young hotshot Eloy Casagrande just destroying that fucking drum kit. This kid, and I do literally mean this kid, having joined the band at the age of 18 during the production of Mediator, has injected Sepultura with a youthful flame and spirit that I don't think could have been achieved otherwise. The classic Sepultura sound that waters the mouths of diehard fans worldwide remains intact on this album as well, emboldened by this super pumped up lineup. The first few tracks in particular are just nasty Brazilian bruisers. God help you if you are not headbanging to these things. But it's through the rest of Quadra, stylistically and conceptually, where Sepultura really begin to flex their muscles and strut their stuff, as Quadra actually is really 4 distinct EPs or 4 distinct pieces that are tied together under one common theme, the quadrivium, the 4 classic liberal arts. Applying that theme directly to this album, Sepultura are exploring 4 different avenues of music, some of which are familiar to longtime Sepultura fans, but all of which are distinct and different enough that it gives Quadra a lot of flavor and diversity right away. The first quarter is the classic Sepultura sound, as we've mentioned. The thrash, the groove, the nastiness, the everything that you love. The second part sticks closer to what we heard from the band in the late 90s and early 2000s. A lot of Brazilian percussion, a lot of indigenous influence, a lot of thick, hearty grooves. Think Roots, but with a little bit more of a modern flavor and less Ross Robinson influence. The third quarter of this album borrows heavily from the band's aforementioned Machine Messiah, particularly its progressive instrumentation. And that leaves us with the final quarter of this album, which definitely also, I think, pulls from Machine Messiah, but it's also a lot moodier, it's a lot slower, it's a lot more ambient and atmospheric and epic, all eventually culminating in the massive closing track, Fear, Pain, Chaos, Suffering, bolstering a special guest appearance from Brazilian rock singer Emily Barreto. The scale, the cinematic weight of this number is quite fascinating. You could literally build another chapter of this album just based on this song. I really love the way that Sepultura has incorporated the concept of the quadrivium into this album, Quadra. I mean, for one, it allows the band to explore a wide range of styles, making this almost objectively their most diverse album ever. And more importantly, it just allows them to really strut their stuff as songwriters, something I don't really feel they've ever gotten the chance to really fucking do, at least not since Max Cavalera left the band. I mean, when you literally listen to the album in a single setting, you literally listen to it adapt and change and progress as it goes on, starting off with the more simplistic, brazen, headbanging numbers, eventually culminating in the more dramatic, epic, grandiose cuts. While it isn't by definition a rock opera, since there isn't an actual story attached to this thing, it certainly does have the flow and the essence of a true big-scale rock opera, a fucking musical, if you will. Side note, how objectively weird yet amazing would it be to have a Sepultura musical? Somebody make that happen. Somebody. And if by chance anyone at home is sitting around thinking, oh man, you make this sound really artsy-fartsy, Robert, I don't want nothing to do with this. Don't worry, the concept never really gets in the way of the actual material. It's still incredibly powerful. There's still plenty of headbanging riffs. There's still plenty of ripping solos. Take, for instance, Guardians of Earth, one of my favorite cuts on the record, where Andreas Kisser gets to indulge in his prog rock influences with acoustic guitars and some lavish solos. Or for that matter, tracks like Capital Enslavement and Isolation, which take you back to the glory days of mid-90s and late 90s Sepultura. The latter of which even opens the album on a pretty unique note with this huge symphony orchestra that doesn't quite line up with the guitars, and it makes everything sound really bizarre, disjointed, demented. It kind of puts you on edge right away. Love the double whammy combo of title track Quadra and Agony and Defeat, particularly how you have this warm, rustic Brazilian guitar introducing everything, eventually diving into some really chunky, heavy guitars, complemented and emboldened by some lavish, subtle choirs, eventually growing, building, swelling, culminating in the aforementioned final track, Fear, Pain, Chaos, Suffering. I suppose if I really wanted to nitpick, I could say that I wish there were more progressive elements across the entire record rather than just in these two little chapters. But that being said, the concept is still really fascinating, and I think even some of the more simplistic brazen tracks on here rank as surprisingly some more intelligent thrash than you'd expect. With that in mind, I'm going with 4 out of 5, and honestly, pretty damn close to a 4.5 out of 5. This is Sepultura's most ambitious album. An argument could definitely be made that this is Sepultura's best album, at the very least their best since the literal glory days. I'm amazed that Sepultura can still reinvent themselves in 2020, particularly when so many of their peers are stuck in this rut, just making the same album over and over. Cough, cough, overkill, cough, cough, anvil. Whew, man, I gotta get that cough checked out. And it makes me so excited to hear even more Sepultura as soon as possible, something that I honestly couldn't have said 10 years ago. I really couldn't have. This modern incarnation of Sepultura is just on a goddamn roll. Highly recommend this to anyone who's enjoyed the modern output of Sepultura. Highly recommend it to anyone who's looking for something a little bit more adventurous in their thrash and their death and their groove metal. I'm sure there are some people that will still dismiss this album because it doesn't have Max on it, and I'm not going to bother arguing with these people because it's been 20 goddamn years and they won't shut up, so I highly doubt I could get them to shut up. All I'm going to say is that, honestly, both parties are perfectly fine doing what they are doing by themselves, so just drop it. Just try to enjoy this album, at least give it a chance, or at the very extreme least, shut the hell up. Because this version of Sepultura ain't going nowhere. And honestly, if they keep releasing quality albums like this, if they keep exploring all of these territories, if they keep challenging themselves like this, then you know what? I don't care if Max ever fucking looks at this band ever again. I don't care. This is Sepultura. This is my Sepultura, and I can't wait to hear from them again. 4 out of 5, a seriously great fucking record. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.